The year is 1965. Backstage at a concert hall in the Deep South, a man sits alone in the darkness. His hands aren't holding a guitar. They're holding a Smith & Wesson revolver. Johnny Cash checks the cylinder. 6 rounds. He snaps it shut with a metallic click that echoes in the empty dressing room. Then he does something most men would never dream of doing before walking on stage. He slides that pistol into his boot. Outside, beyond the thin walls and the velvet curtains, a crowd is gathering. But not everyone came to hear music. Some came to make good on a promise. A promise written in block letters and mailed to his home 3 days earlier. A promise that said if Johnny Cash walked onto that stage tonight, he wouldn't walk off it alive. Members of the Ku Klux Klan were in that audience. They were waiting, watching, and they meant every word of their threat. Most men would have canceled the show. Most men would have slipped out the back door, climbed into their car, and never looked back. But Johnny Cash wasn't most men. He stood up from that chair, adjusted the pistol in his boot, and walked straight toward the stage lights. But to understand why a country music legend was willing to die on that stage, we have to go back. Back to where it all started. Back to a love story that the world decided was forbidden. It's 1954. San Antonio, Texas. A young airman named Johnny Cash is attending a roller skating rink, trying to forget about his deployment orders to Germany. That's when he sees her. Vivian Liberto. She's 17 years old with dark hair, dark eyes, and olive skin that reflects her Sicilian heritage. Her family came from Italy generations ago, settling in Texas, building a life in America. To Johnny, she's the most beautiful thing he's ever seen. They fall in love the way young people do when time is running out. Fast. Completely. Without hesitation. Within weeks, Johnny is deployed overseas, but he writes to her. Every single day, 710 letters in 3 years. Letters filled with dreams of marriage, of children, of a life together when he comes home. And when he does come home in 1954, he keeps his promise. They marry. She becomes Vivian Cash. They move to Memphis, Tennessee, where Johnny starts to chase his music dreams. She gives him 4 daughters. Roseanne, Kathy, Cindy, Tara, a family, a life, everything he ever wanted. But there's something Johnny doesn't fully understand yet. Something Vivian has known her entire life, growing up in Texas with her dark features. In the eyes of the segregated South, your skin tells a story whether you want it to or not. Vivian's olive complexion, her dark hair, her Italian features, and the twisted logic of hate groups and white supremacists, these things made her suspicious. They looked at her and saw what they wanted to see. They didn't see an Italian-American woman. They saw someone they could use as a weapon against a man who was becoming too popular, too influential, too independent. By 1964, Johnny Cash is one of the biggest names in country music. But success makes you visible. And visibility, in those days, made you a target. It starts with a photograph. A simple, innocent photograph published in a magazine. Johnny and Vivian are walking together, and the camera catches them in a moment of ordinary married life. But someone looks at that photograph and sees an opportunity to destroy him. The whispers start small, then they grow louder. Then they become accusations printed in newspapers and screamed from pulpits. Certain groups, certain hate-filled organizations, begin spreading a lie. They claim that Vivian Cash is a black woman. That Johnny Cash has committed the unforgivable sin of marrying across the color line. Now, let's be clear about something. Even if this accusation had been true, there would have been nothing wrong with it. Nothing immoral, nothing shameful. But we're talking about the American South in 1964. We're talking about a time when loving someone of a different race could get you killed. When laws existed specifically to prevent interracial marriage. When hate groups like the Ku Klux Klan saw themselves as the enforcers of racial purity. This wasn't just gossip. This was a death sentence disguised as a rumor. The Klan and other white supremacist organizations see their opening. Here's Johnny Cash, a man singing about outlaws and redemption, a man whose music is starting to cross boundaries, reaching audiences that make certain people uncomfortable. And now they have ammunition. They don't care that Vivian is Italian. They don't care about the truth. Truth was never the point. Fear was the point. Control was the point. They want to make an example out of Johnny Cash. They want to show what happens when you don't bow down, when you don't ask permission, when you don't stay in your lane. The letters start arriving at their home. Not fan mail. Hate mail. envelopes filled with vile racial slurs and explicit threats. Some contain crude drawings depicting violence. Others are more direct, simple messages, short sentences. We know where you live. We know where your daughters go to school. Vivian opens the mailbox one afternoon and finds a letter that describes, in horrifying detail, what will happen to her if she shows her face in public. The language is so hateful, so violent, that her hands shake as she reads it. She burns it in the sink before Johnny gets home. She doesn't want him to see it, doesn't want him to know how scared she is. But he finds out anyway. He always finds out. Radio stations across the South begin pulling his records from their playlists. Not all of them, just enough to send a message. Station managers receive calls, threatening calls, calls that promise boycotts and protests if they continue playing Johnny Cash songs. Some station managers have courage. They keep playing his music. Others fold immediately, terrified of the consequences. Concert venues start canceling bookings. Promoters call with apologetic voices, explaining that they've received threats, that they can't guarantee security, that it's just too dangerous. Johnny understands what they're really saying. They're more afraid of the Klan than they are of disappointing him. The hate groups organize boycotts. They stand outside record stores with signs. They hand out flyers printed with lies and conspiracy theories. They claim Johnny Cash is part of some plot to destroy traditional values, to corrupt white America, to promote race mixing. At home, Vivian becomes a prisoner. She's afraid to take the girls to school, afraid to go to the grocery store, afraid to answer the door. She starts keeping the curtains drawn during the day, starts checking the locks 3, 4, 5 times before bed. Every car that drives slowly past their house could be a threat. Every stranger on the sidewalk could be dangerous. Johnny watches his wife become a shadow of herself. He watches fear steal the light from her eyes. And something inside him changes. Something hardens. The rage builds slowly, like a fire starting deep underground, smoldering, waiting for oxygen. He's not afraid. He's never been afraid of these cowards who hide behind hoods and burn crosses in the dark. But he is furious. Furious that his wife, the mother of his children, has to live in fear because of lies. Furious that faceless bigots think they have the right to terrorize his family. Johnny Cash makes a decision. He's not running. He's not hiding. He's not apologizing for loving his wife. And he's certainly not going to let a bunch of hate-filled cowards dictate how he lives his life. The Man in Black. There's a moment when a man decides who he really is. Not who the world wants him to be. Not who the record labels need him to be. Not who the radio stations expect him to be. But who he is, down in his bones, when everything else is stripped away. For Johnny Cash, that moment comes when he realizes that politeness is pointless. Diplomacy doesn't work with people who want you destroyed. You can't reason with hate. You can't compromise with evil. He's always worn black on stage. It started as a practical choice. Black looks good under stage lights. Black is simple. Black is classic. But now, it becomes something more. It becomes armor. It becomes a statement. I wear the black for the poor and the beaten down, he'll say later. Living in the hopeless, hungry side of town. I wear it for the prisoner who has long paid for his crime, but is there because he's a victim of the times. But right now, in 1965, he wears it as a declaration of war. He wears it because he's done playing nice. He wears it because he's walking into battle, and he wants everyone to know whose side he's on. The death threats become more specific, more detailed. Letters arrive describing the exact caliber of bullet they plan to use, the exact section of the concert hall where they'll be waiting. They want him afraid. They want him to cancel shows. They want him to divorce his wife, denounce her, save his career by throwing her to the wolves. They don't understand who they're dealing with. Johnny Cash grew up poor in Arkansas during the Depression. He picked cotton until his hands bled. He watched his brother die in a sawmill accident when he was just a boy. He served in the Air Force. He's crawled out of poverty through sheer will and talent. He's survived things that would have broken most men. A bunch of cowards hiding behind bed sheets don't scare him. But he's smart enough to know that courage without preparation is just stupidity. So he starts carrying that pistol. Not to start a fight, but to end one if it comes to his door. He practices at a shooting range when he's off the road. He gets good, real good. Good enough that if someone tries to hurt his wife, tries to hurt his daughters, they'll regret it in the last seconds of their life. His friends warn him. His manager begs him to be careful. The record label executives suggest, delicately, that maybe he should make a statement. clarify things, distance himself from the controversy, do something to calm the situation down. Johnny's response is simple. I married Vivian Liberto, and I'll defend her against any man who has something to say about it. The confrontation. The night finally comes. The night when words become action, when threats become real. It's a concert somewhere in the deep south. The exact location doesn't matter. What matters is that Johnny knows they're coming. He received a letter 48 hours earlier. Specific threats, specific promises. If he takes that stage, he won't leave it alive. His security team wants to cancel. The local police offer protection, but their eyes tell him everything he needs to know. They're scared too. Some of them probably sympathize with the hate groups. Some of them probably are members of the hate groups. Johnny tells them all the same thing. I'm playing the show. Backstage, in that dressing room, he loads the pistol. He's not planning to use it, but he's not planning to die without a fight either. He slides it into his boot, pulls his pant leg down over it, and checks himself in the mirror. The man in black stares back at him. He walks to the stage entrance. He can hear the crowd. Thousands of people. Most of them came to hear music. But he knows that somewhere in that sea of faces, there are men who came to kill him. Men who think they're protecting something sacred by destroying him. The house lights go down. The stage lights come up. The announcer calls his name. Johnny Cash walks into the light. The crowd erupts. Applause. Cheers. Screaming. But he's scanning faces. Looking for the ones that aren't cheering. Looking for the ones watching with cold calculation. And he sees them. In the back. Shadows against shadows. Men in the darkness, standing still while everyone else celebrates. He straps on his guitar. He steps to the microphone. The crowd settles down, waiting for him to start the show. But Johnny doesn't start singing. Not yet. He stands there in silence, letting the moment stretch, letting the tension build. The concert hall is massive, but right now it feels small, intimate, like a confrontation in an alley. When he finally speaks, his voice is low, calm, deadly serious. Some folks have threatened me, he says. Threatened my wife. Threatened my family. Said I shouldn't be here tonight. The crowd goes quiet, confused, uncertain. They said if I walked onto this stage, there'd be consequences. You can hear people shifting in their seats. Nervous energy rippling through the audience. Well, I'm here. Pause. And I want to make something real clear. I love my wife, Vivian Cash. I love her more than my music, more than my career, more than my own life. And if any man in this room, or anywhere else, has something to say about that, then you step forward right now and say it to my face. The silence is absolute. No one moves. No one speaks. Somewhere in the back, those shadows seem to shrink, seem to pull back into the darkness. That's what I thought, Johnny says. Then he counts off the band, and they explode into Folsom Prison Blues. The crowd goes absolutely wild. Not just because the music is good, but because they just witnessed something rare. They witnessed a man draw a line in the sand and dare the darkness to cross it. They witnessed courage in its purest form. Nothing happens that night. No shots fired. No violence. The men who came to intimidate him slink away into the darkness like the cowards they are. Because that's what bullies do when someone finally stands up to them. They fold. They retreat. They go looking for easier targets. Johnny plays the whole show with that pistol in his boot. He never has to draw it. His words were weapon enough. Let's not pretend this story has a Hollywood ending. Standing up to hate groups in 1965 comes with a cost. A real, measurable cost. Johnny Cash loses money. Lots of it. Concert bookings dry up in certain parts of the country. Radio stations permanently remove him from their rotation. Sponsors pull their support. The hate campaign works, at least financially. His career takes a hit that would have destroyed a lesser artist. His marriage to Vivian eventually ends, but not because of the threats. The constant touring, the growing addiction problems, the pressure of fame, these things create cracks that the hate groups didn't cause, but certainly made worse. They divorce in 1966. It breaks his heart. It breaks hers. But even years later, even after everything, Johnny never regrets standing up for her. Never regrets defending her honor. The Klan and other hate groups move on to other targets. They always do. They're parasites, looking for the next victim, the next opportunity to spread their poison. But they remember Johnny Cash. They remember the man who didn't back down. And here's what matters. Here's what echoes through the decades. Johnny Cash could have saved his career by throwing Vivian under the bus. He could have issued a statement denouncing her. He could have divorced her immediately, claiming he'd been deceived, playing the victim. The record labels would have forgiven him. The radio stations would have welcomed him back. The sponsors would have returned. But he would have had to live with himself. He would have had to look his daughters in the eye and explain why he abandoned their mother to save his career. He would have had to become the kind of man who sacrifices love for money. And Johnny Cash was not that kind of man. The legacy. Today, we remember Johnny Cash as a legend. The man in black. The voice of outlaws and prisoners and forgotten people. We remember Ring of Fire and A Boy Named Sue and that famous concert at Folsom Prison. We remember the iconic photographs and the late career resurrection and the American recordings. But we should also remember this. We should remember the night he walked onto a stage with a gun in his boot, knowing men in the crowd wanted him dead, and he stood there anyway. We should remember that he chose love over safety, chose honor over money, chose to be a man worth respecting over being a celebrity worth pitying. Because in the end, that's what separates legends from footnotes. Anyone can sing a song. Anyone can play a guitar. But it takes something special to look evil in the face and refuse to blink. It takes something rare to protect the people you love, even when the world tells you to abandon them. Johnny Cash wasn't perfect. He struggled with addiction. He made mistakes. He had regrets. But when it mattered most, when the test came, he passed. He stood up. He fought back. Not with hatred, but with courage. Not with violence, but with conviction. And that's why, decades later, we still tell his story. Because we need to remember that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing the right thing even when you're terrified. It's loving someone even when it costs you everything. It's walking toward the danger instead of running away from it. Johnny Cash walked toward the danger. And he did it for love. That gun in his boot, he never had to fire it. His words were enough. His presence was enough. His refusal to be intimidated was enough. The hate groups wanted to destroy him. Instead, they made him immortal. Because people forget songs. They forget hits. They forget chart positions and award shows. But they never forget a man who stood up to evil and won. They never forget a hero. And make no mistake, Johnny Cash was a hero. Not because he was famous. Not because he could sing. But because when the moment came, when the test arrived, when the choice stood before him, he chose love. Every single time.